doing it, and it's happening repetitively, and you don't know why, right? That suggests that there's some hidden reason within your psyche as to why, and that has to be unearthed and dealt with, and that's where I would recommend therapy in particular.
I see.
So yeah, that's my sort of stance on it, if that makes sense.
Thank
Does that
you.
answer your question?
It makes sense, but it generated more questions, but maybe we can take
Sure.
offline.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll offer more opportunities for Q&A about that. Yeah, I mean it's a whole topic, and honestly, it's not a bad topic. But yeah, you can come back to me with in further Q&As even during the session if you'd like. And we can talk about it more because I really should talk about it more, because the reality is a lot of the obstacles that seekers do face, one way or the other, is coming to grips with their emotional stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the I was sort of mentioned this very briefly, made a fleeting reference to this earlier today, but one of the hidden powers of surrender and self-inquiry is that they create a kind of space where otherwise difficult to deal with emotions can surface sort of safely. Because why? Because the connection with self-inquiry or with surrender create a kind of like buffer. They create a kind of like connection with something which is beyond the difficult emotion, and which therefore permits it to arise without overwhelming the person entirely. So actually, therapy and these practices are, in my opinion, highly complementary, because this permits those emotions to rise. Therapy also, helps to deal with those emotions and facilitates the quiet mind, and the quiet mind facilitates the practice, and so it's a nice virtuous circle that way. So yeah, I mean, the truth is, though I don't talk about it maybe nearly as much as I should, and perhaps that's due to the fact that I'm not, though I have read quite a bit about it and I've been involved in it in various capacities, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychoanalyst, and that's not really exactly my area of expertise. So I hesitate sometimes in making serious pronouncements on it. But I do have a good amount of familiarity. But I can think maybe eventually I will show more detailed connections between them. But yeah, the reality is a lot of things that people have to deal with, and I've seen this on multiple occasions, a lot of things that seekers have to deal with are problems that hook into their emotional life. And that if those problems are not dealt with one way or the other, their practice will hit a barrier that will not be surmounted until those problems are dealt with.
Right.
Basically.
Because you mentioned obstacles.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that if you're facing obstacles in your practice, like for some reason you're not motivated to do your practice.
Yes.
So one of the questions I had was, maybe it's not the practice for you. Maybe you need to be following a different path.
Yeah, quite possible. That's also quite possible, absolutely. So surrender and self-inquiry, though they are the spiritual practices, they're not for everybody, basically. You're absolutely right that someone may not be ready for them, is the truth, actually. And that they might want to pursue something that does comport with them. But I do think there's a number of people where self-inquiry or surrender are the right practices for them. But, but they need to deal with their emotional baggage first, in some sense. So but you're right. So, that's why we do have this sort of whole plethora, this variety of spiritual practices, everything from, mantras and prayers to visiting temples, visiting holy places. There's a whole slew of things that one can do, short of these spiritual practices, which are, the most demanding, basically. They're the most powerful and they're the most demanding, and, in a sense, they're the most scary, because they require people to challenge directly the notion of themselves as being in charge of their lives, and that is scary, to some extent. So not everyone is prepared to do that, essentially, Yeah.
Okay.
So when you refer to baggage, are you referring to baggage as created in this life, or are you looking at baggage that could have come from?
That's a good question. I mean, initially the baggage, primarily baggage created in this life, but you're absolutely right that baggage could be from prior lives, and even in therapy itself, there's this idea, for example, of intergenerational trauma. You can view that as, your parents' baggage, your parents' parents' baggage, and that is all passed down in some sense to you. So, that's a great point.
And sometimes community baggage.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely, collective baggage. Yes, absolutely. So, it could be that. I think it depends on the individual. The reality is, right, though we talk about quelling the attachments, right, in a sense, the truth is, right, this is like, I think the metaphor goes in one of the scriptures, right, like you're trying to empty the ocean with a blade of grass or something like that, right? I mean, in some sense, the attachments are literally infinite, right? And you're not going to be able to quell them all. All you can do is, but still, the mere effort to go some way along that line, right, is sufficient. Because the reality is, the attachments, though they are infinite in some sense, are also illusory. It's just like the drawing of an ocean that goes on forever. It goes on forever, but it's an ocean that is drawn, not real. So when you make enough headway and quell enough of the attachments, which may be a relatively small portion of the whole, there could be a perspective change that suddenly shows you the whole thing is 2D. Yeah, that's all that can be hoped for. That's all that's necessary. You can't actually, you can't actually one by one uproot everything, because the reality is it goes on forever. If we look at the if we look at the scriptures, right, if there are past lives, if we think of it in that way, then they go on infinitely, and so there's an unlimited amount of karma, but by grace, how do we surmount it all simultaneously? It's because there's a perspective shift that shows that none of them are what they seem to be. And that's the point. You cannot do it. If we take them to be real, then you can never get over it. It's only because there's a shift that they all simultaneously vanish.
Yes. That's the realization of the impermanence of everything. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, the realization of the impermanence of everything is a part of it, but ultimately this quest is about penetrating the illusion of individual selfhood. That's what it comes down to, right? Mm-hmm. So there is this very tricky, magical sense that you are an individual. Mm-hmm. That sense is sustained by the movement of the mind. Yeah. And the purpose of the practice is to, as much as possible, slow the movement, quiet the movement of the mind, and then to examine the resulting silence and to try to discern, what's observing that silence, basically. In that the silence becomes the clear reflection of the self. And that in that reflection, one must say, who is recognizing this reflection, basically. So that is what then permits eventually the recognition of the nature of the illusion of individual identity. That's really that's what we're dealing with here. It's actually the nature of the illusion. The self itself is not really knowable as an object. In a sense, what's knowable is the illusory nature of the illusion. And in the recognition of the illusory nature of the illusion, like by dint of that, one grasps, like by extension, in some sense, the truth. It's like Pinocchio is a wooden puppet who supposedly becomes a real boy, but he doesn't really become a real boy. He's a puppet, right? It's imagination, right? But the very moment when Pinocchio realizes he's just a puppet, it's like that very moment, that very moment of realizing I'm just a puppet, is also simultaneously a moment that one realizes, there's a puppeteer. I'm really actually not Pinocchio. I'm Geppetto, the puppet maker, basically, right? Like that moment. So, the mind in some sense comes to its own limit, recognizes its own boundary, but as soon as you see a boundary, then you recognize there's a beyond the boundary.
So there's a oneness between Pinocchio and the puppet.
Yes, exactly. That's right, precisely. Right, Pinocchio is an imaginary creation, essentially. you know. But the imaginary creation is not really separate from the real creator, one might say. I mean, it's tricky. The creator is not really, you know, this is, in this picture now we have a problem. I've already created a problem now, because I have creator and created. Creator and created is itself part of the illusion, you know. There really is no two pieces like that, right? As soon as you have two pieces, now you're in the illusory world. You know, but there is some kind of underlying non-dual truth that can't be put in words, basically. As soon as you put it in words, now you're in duality. Yeah. But duality is not exactly the opposite of non-duality. Duality is, you know, the manifestation of non-duality, actually. You know? The dual is always the manifestation of the real, you might say. The self is manifesting as all of this. But we're trying to get beyond the idea that the self is just this, you know? We think that this is all there is, but actually that's not true. There's something else, right? The something else is hidden by the continuous, you know, focus on identity-based projects, desires and fears, basically, right? It's hidden by that movement. So you've got to unveil it through obtaining a quiet mind, through various kinds of practices, and ultimately through the practices of surrender and inquiry. And then, you know, discern what remains.
Can you give an example of a moment where you practice surrender and inquiry in daily life? Like, what does that practice look like?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So let's start with that. So we'll start with self-inquiry, right? So, you know, so in self-inquiry, you know, I'm going to repeat the basic instruction, right? Which is, you have an ordinary, very ordinary, moment to moment, second to second sense of existing. Okay. Self-inquiry is a practice of trying to turn your attention towards this sense and make it the object of your attention. When you try to do this, what inevitably happens is that your mind goes towards some feeling or thought. When it does that, you notice that this feeling or thought, you ask yourself, you don't have to verbally ask yourself, but you may initially verbally ask yourself, am I aware of this feeling or thought? And then inevitably you will say yes. And what you are aware of cannot be you. It cannot be you. It cannot be that sense of existing, basically. So as soon as you notice that this is actually an object and not you, then you have to again repeat the exercise. Either you say, okay, well again I'm going back to the sense of I and looking for it again, or you know, you can phrase it as I am, you know, who is it that's aware of this? You know, and then repeat the exercise. And again, you will find that as you look for you, again you will come to another feeling, another thought, and again this will be an object of which you're aware, right? And so you're faced with this strange paradox of, here it is, the most obvious second-to-second experience of my own existence that I have, but when I look for it, all I see is a series of objects. Where is me? I know I'm here, but where? This is the paradox of inquiry. So in daily life, what it turns out to be is you do this exercise all the time, and everything else gets deprioritized, because the reason anything else matters is because it's connected to you, right? It's my career, it's my family, it's my goals, it's my fears. And the first important goal of self-inquiry is to recognize that the my of these situations connects to an unknown. Like, okay, my career, well, who am I? And then as soon as you start thinking, well, who am I? Like, meaning this observer of all these events, where exactly is that? Like, I say I'm here, but what do I mean by that? Where in my experience is this I? And we find that I must be here, but I don't know what it is that I am. That lack of knowledge of what it is that I am is a huge thing, because it immediately is going to destabilize all your commitments. Because, I give this example. I don't know if I gave it last year. I may have, but I'll repeat myself shamelessly. Which is, imagine, right? You were, you were in an important work meeting or something like that, for example, right? And you go into the bathroom. Okay, you go into the bathroom and you look in the mirror, and in the mirror you see the face of someone else. Okay, someone else's face in the mirror, and you're like shocked, of course, and you walk out, but everyone just treats you like normal. There's nothing odd about their response. They're like, oh yeah, of course it's you. No. You go back into the bathroom again, it's someone else's face. Okay, so how important at this point does your work meeting become? Probably like of zero importance, because you're now thinking, am I going insane? Am I having a psychotic episode? What is going on, right? Something very odd is happening, right? This is akin to the situation that we're actually in, because as soon as you actually do self-inquiry and take it seriously, the real import is you literally are in this situation where you truly do not know who you are. And that should really, jolt us with lightning if we take it seriously. Because we're just smugly living life as if it's obvious who we are. But yeah, so, even before realization, this sense of profound mystery, because, really it's as if, in your closet, like you open the closet and there's like a black hole, which is a portal to some other galaxy or something like that. And you're like, okay, let me just close this door and pretend it doesn't exist. I'm gonna go about my life like normal. This is essentially what it is, right? If you actually open that door and look, you would be freaked out. That's people don't do it. People don't do it for that reason. But yeah, this is the point, right? So living life, and actually practicing inquiry is a process of staring at this mystery, basically, and trying to discern what it is. Because on the one hand, you have this profound mystery of I don't know who I am, and on the other hand, you have this immediate sense of I'm here. I'm here, but I can't figure out what exactly is here when I say that I'm here. Something's here. I must be here somewhere. But where and what is this me that I say that I am that's here? I can't seem to pinpoint, but I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying because what you're looking for is in your experience. It's in your experience. You are experiencing your own existence, right? Again, right? What happens is every time we have every moment we're experiencing, and the hidden factor, it's not really hidden, but it's the unattended to factor of every experience is the fact that the experience is being experienced by someone. We don't think about that fact. We look here and we see the thing that we're looking at. It takes a moment to reflect and to say, there's a looker. Otherwise there couldn't be a scene. I'm here as the looker. Okay, but but where is that? Where is the I who's looking? So self-inquiry is recognizing in every moment, I'm here as the experiencer. We don't think about this fact. Just like I mentioned yesterday, like we don't think about the fact necessarily that there's a frame around a picture. Or we don't think about the fact when you look into a mirror that the mirror is a mirror. There's objects in the mirror, but often we don't reflect on the mirrorness of the mirror. That's yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm struggling to understand the purpose of this practice, and the reason is that you're talking about the experiencer, that which is experienced, the object, and the act of experiencing, and that is the Triputi,
Sure.
Right? And we're talking about transcending the Triputi, not trying to understand further who the experiencer is. Isn't that
Well,
the non-dual experience?
we are trying to essentially understand, quote unquote, what the experiencer is. But we're not doing it through just thinking about what the experiencer is. We're doing it by recognizing that we have a direct knowledge somehow of the experiencer, that is our own I-ness, and we're trying to then examine that somehow. It's just that when we try to examine it, it turns out to be very difficult to find. But it's there, but it's, what is it? So,
So why do you need to find it? So again, when you say find,
Yeah, why?
you're objectifying it.
Well, we are, because we're looking for what that is. And so we need to find it, because it turns out that this I experience, which is a very special, very magical experience, is the root of the mind, and is the root of the illusion of individuality. This I subject experience is the base thought from which all the other thoughts arise. That's why it's so important. And it's the illusion machine, basically.
So it's a thought then. It's a base thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it is the base thought. I mean, exactly, it is the base thought. And it's very special, because it is thought and it isn't a thought. It's sitting on the border between, you might say, the big self, which is beyond all opposites, and the world of duality, which is our usual world in which we live. It sits where it is, you might even say, the border between those two. So on one side, it appears to be a kind of thing, like, oh yeah, me is this solid-seeming core entity. I'm here somewhere, that. But on the other side, it turns out to be something quite different, which is not a thing at all. Not a thing at all, actually. So it has this weird dual characteristic, of from when seen from a distance, it appears to be a solid entity. When seen up close, it turns out to be not an entity at all. So that's, it's very strange, but true. So, so the goal is, if we want to escape from the burdens and limitations.
So when you say seen up close and
Yes.
seen from a distance,
Yeah.
again, you're attributing space to this.
Well, I'm using metaphor here. The point is that one
Right,
has
I mean,
to.
even metaphorically, I am that. So how can there be any separation?
Well, it's a very good question. It goes to show that the I that we think we are, is in fact not what we are in the way that we think we are it. You're right. So when we say I'm self-aware, okay, I'm aware of myself. In a sense, you've already admitted, in some sense, that I'm an object. Because by the rules of self-inquiry, the rule of self-inquiry is what you are aware of, you are not. And if I say I'm aware of myself, then the logic must follow, as night follows day, that I'm not I. I'm not I. That's the conclusion you have to draw. But what does that really mean, right? So it's not useful enough to just follow that logically. You have to see it for yourself. What does that mean? What does it mean that I'm not I? What does that mean? Well, what is this I that I am not? Or what is it I that seems like I am, but in fact I know at some level I'm not? You can't know the larger self directly. All we can do is scrutinize this paradoxical thing. Does that make sense? Kind of. It's it's
yeah, because I'm Gita introduced me to Swami Bodhananji, and we are
Yes.
kind of steeped in his teachings,
Sure,
right?
yes.
So I'm trying to kind of reconcile, how I learned it with him. Although there is no fundamental difference.
Sure.
I mean, this is Ramana Maharshi. He also teaches Ramana Maharshi texts.
yes.
But his style may be a little different.
Yes.
So which is why I'm struggling to kind of reconcile.
Yes, yeah,
that.
understandable. Yes.
So the thing is, there is this illusion. He always keeps trying to challenge our assertion that we have to do something to realize Brahman, or that we have to do something, right? Like that spirituality involves going somewhere or doing something or attaining something or achieving something. And at that point, anytime we get into that kind of lingo or that kind of conversation, he immediately jumps in and says, but you are that, right? He breaks that how do you call it, he doesn't allow us to go on that track. right? He brings us back. It's
Yes,
um,
yes.
it's disruptive. He disrupts our train of thought
Right.
when we are doing that. Kind
Well, yeah. So I mean, again, this is it's complicated because how do I put this? There are many contexts in which to view what he's doing in that situation. But one thing I'll say is, right, there are many pointers that Maharishi himself says, right, and it's absolutely correct, that we are indeed that, and that we are indeed that without any effort, that we are indeed that without any effort, right? But if you think about it for a second, right, so someone's telling you this, right, okay, you don't need to do anything, you're already that. Well, if you're already that without needing to do anything, why is this person saying so to you? They're saying so to you because there's an implicit idea that you have to take this statement and this statement must penetrate somehow, and it's going to do something to you to get you somewhere. So this strange statement that you're already there, no effort required, which is true, is actually at another level a kind of way to get you to see that, which if you took the statement absolutely literally, no one would ever make that statement because there'd be no need to make the statement because you're already that without any effort. so there's a.
So you're saying that the fact that he has to remind
That's
us
right.
means that paradoxically
That's
there's
right.
something that needs to be done.
Exactly.
Okay.
So to the seeker, right? To the seeker, whoever the seeker is, right? Now it may end up in the end analysis, and this is true, right? In the final analysis, when the seeker finds what the seeker is looking for, it may turn out there never was a seeker. There never was a seeker, and there was no quest, and there was no effort, and that there was only that the whole time. That's true, actually. So I mean, that is the actual truth. But nevertheless, to that person who seems like right now they feel like they're the seeker, to that person, this is suggested. You know, that to that one, whoever that one is. When that person investigates who they actually are, they may find they were never the seeker, and they were never investigating, and they were never finding either. The whole thing falls apart in the end, you know. And by the same token, nor was it ever said to them that they were effortlessly that. Even that statement never was ever made, or even this statement, because Ramana Maharishi, and I mean my focus in Maharishi is practice, practice, practice. You know, these suggestions were never made, perhaps, you know, in some end analysis. So it's only from a certain perspective. It's a certain perspective, and frankly, a certain incomplete, what might I say, incomplete or flawed perspective, really, that this whole situation occurs, where this game must be played, where the seeker must be seeking and then find. This is all within the dualistic perspective. The final reward of following this game will be to break that perspective and reveal it to be a nothing in some sense.
Okay. Sorry, I don't want to derail your.
No, it's okay.
You had something specific.
Well, I mean, I will. Let me just do this. Let me open up, just in case anyone online has any questions. I'll just open it up. I mean, I wanted to say right again, to reiterate, right? You know, as you try these practices, and we're gonna, you know, have a practice session very shortly. But as you try these practices, you know, in your daily life, right? You know, please bring these experiences here, and any doubts or issues, you know, that come up, we can discuss them. So I'll just leave the opportunity for a minute, for, you know, a few seconds anyway, if anyone online has any questions or comments or anything like that. Oh, hold on 1 second. I can't hear you yet. There's a little volume issue.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah.
1 second. Sorry.
Yeah. Can you talk?
Nope. Still a problem.
Wait, but do you have the volume? Like,
Yeah, volume is fully there.
fully on?
Yeah.
You mute
Fully,
like
no. My volume is fully there. Oh yeah, speaker.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's
Now it's
right.
working.
Right.
Now try.
Now try.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Much
yeah,
better.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and I guess I would just join with you in saying that, you know, I think I'm, you know, by standards, I'm very serious.
Francis.
Been doing it a long time, and I still think it's one of the, you know, the between actually owning it and being it is very wide, no matter how dedicated you are to, and this is all not new to me. If I showed you my books here, there, and what I've been doing for years, it's still an extremely, and I've often thought, well, do I need to be a renunciate? And I am, outside of the fact that I go to work and I have a very serious business, dealing with, decisions that are measured every moment, whether you were successful or not. So it's kind of like, no matter how, but I have the earnestness, and I'm not, I know what you're saying is true. And I don't think, I know everyone here probably knows the reality. The truth is that we are not these body minds. Mm-hmm. And the beauty is, if you look at the ones who knew it, like Jesus and Buddha and Ramana Maharshi, in this Argadatta, the ones that really lived it, they were examples for us to do it, mm-hmm. to really do it. And what is the payoff? It's not just to be okay in this world. It's to really, connect back to, and again, that's all just words, right? There's nothing to connect back to, like what was said. We really are that already, but it's still very, very difficult. And I was interested in your surrender yesterday, because I've always thought of surrender was, okay, I'm just gonna die today. I don't have to die again. Just die to the world, die to the whole thing. But it's not easy, because the ego, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's faster than a split second.
Yeah.
It jumps. It's, and I know it's called vasanas.
Yeah.
And it's prarabdha from previous lives, and it's from karma from this life, and it is associations, the whole 9 yards.
Yep.
I see with the grandchild, we teach her right away to have an ego.
Uh-huh. Yep.
So
yep.
That's all I had to say. I really respect.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you're good. You're good. That's why I'm doing this. Because I love it. I want it badly, but I can tell you how uneasy it is.
Yeah. Oh, it's not easy.
Even when you know all the books, read it all,
done
it all, blah blah blah.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. Absolutely. It's not easy at all. Absolutely right. That's right. It's a struggle. It is.
Yeah.
And even for those like Ramana who've seemingly accomplished it effortlessly at 16, right? He would say, right, he only did so because he had put in a lot of effort in previous lives. So, that's what he would certainly say of himself. So yeah, absolutely. It's a struggle, but at the same time, you should take heart in knowing that, the scriptures tell us that those who embark upon this quest will inevitably, eventually, reach the goal. This is guaranteed. So, you will get there. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. It will reach the ground eventually. So
then, just like effortless, you do a lot of effort to become an expertise.
Yes.
And then you say you do things effortlessly.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly right.
Just like that.
Exactly.
I just happened to read something from I Am That today. Sargadatta said the exact same thing. So you're right on there. Thank you.
And I'll just add as well, right, just real quick, since you mentioned the idea of like, pivoting to surrender, this little action that seems to be taken, right, because we seem to be doing surrender, which is necessary. We seem to be doing surrender. But really, the truth is, right, the doing of surrender is itself just a thought, right? So really, ideally, if you were going to surrender, what you would do is you would surrender by ignoring all thoughts and quieting the willpower, and then, as I sometimes recommend to people, the very thought that I'm surrendering, you just surrender that as well. So, because the reality is you aren't actually doing that thing. That little piece, the pivot, is not actually happening. Because the pivot is really just the pivot's just a thought. The reality is you are surrender. Whether you like it or not, whether you think you're pivoting or not, in fact, the truth is you are surrender with a capital S. Helplessly, that's the case. So the pivot is really just a concession to the seeker's mind. The reality is no pivoting required. So what you ironically have to do is pivot, and then ignore the idea that you're pivoting. Surrender, and then ignore the idea that this surrender is a separate action called surrender. So do surrender, but then
do you think the mental vision of the Jnani or the guru is helpful there, or would you leave that
The mental image of the guru, I mean, if it's helpful, you can use it for a while, but ultimately, you know, or you can say I'm surrendering to God or surrendering to the guru. It's totally fine. You know, eventually, yeah, I mean, it's not a big problem. You know, because after all, we do have this one thought of surrender, and eventually, if you want to view it as surrendering to the guru, it's totally okay, not a problem. Eventually, it and the thought of surrender as a separate practice will both, you know, burn themselves up. So yeah, it depends on the person. If someone views it as helpful to view themselves as surrendering to God or a guru, it's not a problem, I think.
Thank you.
Sure. Sorry, you were going to ask a question?
Yeah, the willpower.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understood what you were saying. So would a state of openness to infinite possibilities, for instance, like in this moment, the next moment, anything can happen, right? It's infinite possibilities.
Sure.
Is that what you call like releasing willpower? Like even though we do act with agenda, we act with goals, we act with, you know, with the expectation of something happening, but it is the state that matters. It's the inner state of openness to infinite possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably okay. I'm just thinking about that. I'm not 100% sure. I have to really think about it a little bit further. But I would say that, you know, think of it this way, right? So like just the way that you are right now, right? When if you're sitting down, or maybe not even right now because at least you're paying attention to my voice, but if you were just, let's say, lying down, right? And really just utterly relaxed, right? Nothing to do, just totally relaxed.
Or with so much pain also you are relaxed.
Well, no, that's a separate issue. But let's just think about the relaxed. I'm just talking about the willpower part right now. Just so you're totally relaxed. Now imagine that there's something in you. It's not just the body. There's some kind of thing which you're not doing, which is you're not putting what feels like your effort into anything particular.
Yeah.
So that is what I would say is relaxed willpower. Now what we want to do essentially is protect that state, which does not necessarily mean that you have to keep lying down. What it means is you're protecting the state of relaxation, of deep inner, that muscle. There's like that muscle, which feels like a muscle, right?
Yes.
It feels like a muscle. That we're kind of like hyper-vigilantly protecting. There is a use of willpower there. Like the willpower is in protecting that muscle from being activated for anything else.
So that is the tapas.
Yeah, you can say that's absolutely. You can say that's tapas, right? You know, it's as if you're sitting, or you're lying down in some comfortable bed, and you are just you knew for a fact that all of this was just a dream, and that none of it mattered, and that in fact you couldn't change anything in it, right? And if you really knew that, then you would be utterly relaxed. And that doesn't mean that the body would be necessarily be relaxed. It would do what it wants. It's not about the body being relaxed or not relaxed. It could be relaxed, it might not be relaxed. The issue is, whatever it feels like is your controlling of it. That control muscle, we're trying to relax that muscle, and we're trying to keep it relaxed by protecting it from thoughts that are going to come in and tell it, oh, you've got to do this now. It's important that you do that, or avoid this, or whatever, right? It's going to try to persuade you that you're the character in the dream, and that you have to act accordingly. And your job is to ignore those thoughts as lies and just keep relaxing, basically.
Well, what if I defined it as, I mean, this is my way of understanding it. What if I defined it as just being in love with the moment? Being in love in the moment. Just the way it is, because you're not trying to you're not trying to reject any of where you are, who you are. I mean, there's no duality, basically.
I can see where you're coming from. I mean, I'm a little like persnickety about this language, because I feel like the tricky thing is, right, I want to say that surrender is accepting all mental and emotional states, and those states might include rejection of the moment. So you might feel like, I hate the way things are going right now, And surrender is like, okay, hate is just another color in the mind.
I
So,
see.
you know, you can have that state, you know, and so it's not that you know, this is the beauty of it, right? It doesn't tell you have to say everything's okay. You don't have to say everything's okay. Everything can be un-okay. It's not a problem. The issue is, what you're doing is you are, in effect, disidentifying yourself with the one who says that things are either okay or not okay. That's the key, right? You're recognizing that set of thoughts, whether the thought is of acceptance or the thought is of rejection. Either the acceptance thought or the rejection thought, neither are me, and I'm not going to take it as reality, and I'm not going to react accordingly, basically. That's all. So it permits everything to happen, right? This is what the key point is. You don't have to enforce a kind of mental anything, including love. Because love, after all, in that sense, is a specific emotion. And, you know, we don't want to demand anything specific of the mind. Let the mind be what it is. Let it be filled at times with hatred or with whatever it wants. It's okay, because the real acceptance is permitting that too. So if you really want
what
to say,
you're describing is really love.
yes,
What you're
exactly, correct.
It is.
That's
It
right.
is.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. So if you want to say love is acceptance of truly all emotions, including non-love emotions
Right.
and rejection, then we could say that. You could say that in a sense.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because when I'm in session with clients,
Mhm.
that is the state that I'm aspiring to,
Yeah.
of being open to anything.
Yeah.
Like, you know, one moment the client is fine, the next moment
Yeah.
they're crying, the next
Yes.
moment they're angry.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
my flexibility and my openness to hold all of that is what demands of me to have that attitude of surrender.
Yeah.
for every moment.
There's
And
definitely
that
some similarity
happens,
for
that
sure.
is facilitated by this feeling of love, because of that, the love that transcends the dualities, right? The love of saying, you know, everything is acceptable, everything is accepted in a moment,
Yes,
whatever the client is.
Well, yes, but for example, I mean, it's a great point, and you know, you're absolutely right. But I will say, right, there may be times, I don't know if you've encountered this, but perhaps you have, where you're with your clients, and you might feel positive dislike of them.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be able to accept that too within yourself.
Well,
That,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
yes,
So
yes.
then there is a question of that's when the inquiry comes in. It's like, who is it that's disliking, and what is that part of me that's disliking, and where is that coming from?
Yes.
And that's where the sort of the you know, there's components of the unconscious mind that are at play there.
Yes.
It's like countertransference
Yes,
reactions,
yes,
basically,
yes,
which I then need to inquire into.
Yes, 100%.
And it's only when I inquire and bring it into the light of my awareness is then when I'm able to surrender. Because I can surrender to the idea that I'm having a countertransference reaction,
Yeah.
but I don't know where it's coming from. So I still have to inquire into it, expose it, or
Yes.
bring it into
Yes,
awareness,
yes.
and then I can surrender to it.
Yes, sure, absolutely. So, you know, just for those who don't know what countertransference is, right? In a therapeutic relationship, you know, we're bringing to bear on the relationship, you know, expectations that are drawn from our upbringing, especially towards significant figures like parents and stuff like that. We're regarding the other person in the relationship through those filters, so that when the patient regards the therapist through those filters, that's called transference, basically. And when the therapist regards the patient through their filters, that's called countertransference. I mean, this is a very quick description. But, you know, so, you know, without going too much into the therapy domain, I just want to say the key point being that so long as we don't conceive of love as disallowing your dislike, hatred, and other negative emotions towards the client,
Absolutely.
then it's fine. Yes, if you can say, I love the client, but that doesn't stop me from hating them, right? That's okay. Yes,
Right.
absolutely. You're right. That's true love, because you're also permitting yourself to feel what you're feeling
Right.
in that moment. And in fact, then using it as fodder for further inquiry
Exactly.
into what the patient
Exactly.
is feeling. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I
100%.
don't, we don't even need to go into therapy for that. Any relationship,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
The transference, countertransference happens in any relationship.
Yes, correct,
Well, what you're
100%.
saying, Akilesh, is absolutely right, because it's pure consciousness without anything on it,
Yes.
unveiled purity, and that's the space of, you know, that's everything. When you're not thinking, when you're just being, it's beautiful, and everything is good.
Yeah.
No there is no duality. It's
Yeah.
the self.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're totally right on.
Yeah, exactly. So if we want to view it, if we want to use that term love for that kind of thing, as long as we realize that love is not in that sense an emotion,
Right.
but is rather the acceptance of all emotions, positive and negative.
Right.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, exactly. That's right. And also, I do think the key thing is that I do think the non-use of the willpower is a key
Yeah,
thing
but
here.
when you're
because,
really happy, you'll accept both.
yeah, exactly. That's right.
That's all. Yeah. In
That's
other
right.
words, that's the
Yes,
state.
yes, exactly. That they'll accept both.
Yeah.
And the relaxation is, I think, key because when though we're relaxed, we're relaxed except for the practice, because the practice is unwinding our habits of non-relaxation. But in surrender, the sweetness is ultimately derived from the non-effort.
Yeah.
The non-effort, right? I don't have to do anything. Rather, things are just happening. So it's amazing. That's the magic, right? The magic is actually you're exerting no effort and life is just going by itself. So that's the truth. The falsehood is you have to be this sort of driven participant who has to do all these things. It's Maharishi says, I'll see if I can find this verse anyway, because I have this text here, where he says, where does he say this? He says, if I can find it.
Is it Upadeshasadam?
No, this is the appendix to the
Supplement
supplement to the 40
verses.
verses.
Oh.
Well, okay, I can't seem to find it, but I think it's somewhere here. But basically, he says something like, and he says it in multiple places anyway. He says, people who think they're, in control of any of their actions are like the decorative gargoyles, that seem to hold up, temples. Like there seems to be this monster that's holding up the pillar of the temple, right? But it's not. It's just an ornament. It's not doing anything structurally at all. Zero. And actually, that's the same state we're in, where in truth there's actually zero control. And surrender is eventually clearing up the attachments that prevent us from seeing that quite clearly ourselves. By taking it on faith for a bit. Another option is inquiry, of course. But with that, let's do this. So let's do some. As we've been talking about surrender, let's do 10 minutes of surrender together. Again, two facets of it. One is just continuously recognizing that at every moment you are experiencing an experience, and by recognizing that fact, we recognize as well that we are not this experience, and that this experience is not truth, but is rather, in a sense, just an image or a story that's presented to us. And so we want to recognize this fact. When we say ignore it, what I mean is not that it has to be repressed or in any way driven out of the mind, but rather that we don't allow our attention to get drawn into it in a way that makes us lose sight of the fact that it's just an experience. And simultaneously, not that it really is so applicable to sitting here in the setting, but to relax the willpower. Just relax, basically, is what it comes down to. Just relax. So let's do that for 10 minutes and then we'll discuss. So let me just set the 10-minute timer.
I was trying to question, so one is I was observing my body, because one of the things that happens for me in therapy sessions is my body is like an antenna, and if my body is fully relaxed, that's when I can pick up, like an antenna, I can pick up the client's anxieties or their tension, their stress. So I was just trying to see if I could get to that state of being completely relaxed, but then of course, wandering thoughts, questions, and I'm trying to go to this place of, okay, who is asking the question, why does this question come up, but then one question that lingered was, so if I'm happy in the moment, do I still need to inquire into that?
Well, so, again, in surrender, which is a bit different from self-inquiry, there's no need for inquiries at all. The key point in surrender is simply that you're continuously noticing that the experience is an experience. It's like you're continuously noticing. Another way of looking at it is you're continuously noticing that there's something apart from the experience, namely you. Or another way of looking at it is you're looking at a mirror, again, to use a mirror analogy, and you're noticing the silvery surface of the mirror again and again. Because when you look at a mirror, your eye is naturally drawn to the objects reflected. If you start to notice the actual surface of the mirror, what happens to the objects? Do you know?
They're still there.
They're still there, but then what happens to the reflection? They blur. Because you can't, your eye, your mind, your brain, or whatever you want to call it, can't focus on both at the same time.
I see.
So when you see the object, you don't see the mirror, essentially. When you see the mirror as a mirror, the objects blur. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to continuously reawaken ourselves from the object view to the mirror view. And that, or another way of looking at it, and these are all other ways of putting it, it's like every moment, right? It's like someone's putting this incredibly mesmerizing picture in front of you. And it would be incredibly easy just to get lost in this picture. And your job is to not get lost in it, but rather pull yourself away,
Right.
reclaim your attention, and recognize this is a picture. And then the next second, another picture is put down, the very next second. And you have to repeat this process again and again and again, and continue to keep drawing your attention back and noticing this is just a picture, this is just a picture, this is just a picture. You don't have to say the words. The point is the noticing act that this is an image projected on a surface, basically, and you're noticing the surface again and again and again and again. This is why Maharishi says, the practice and ultimately, the self really is, it's the only true state of being awake, because every other time you're essentially asleep in a kind of dream. Like each experience is like a little dream, where you forget who you are, you forget what's happening, and you're lost in this particular narrative or this particular image. And so you pull yourself out and recognize, this is just a narrative, this is just an image, and I'm not actually in it. This is just a voice, essentially. I mean, if it's words, it doesn't have to be words, but whatever it is, whatever experience it may be, the point is that whatever it is isn't you. That's the point, and isn't truth. That's also the point, and doesn't need your willpower, which is all. These are all related, because you only use your willpower, or what you think is your willpower, when you take this, whatever this is, to be true. Like, this is real, this is actually happening, and because it's actually happening, I'm really this person who's in this actual happening. And because of that, I must use my willpower to navigate it. If you don't believe that this is actually happening, then you would not use your willpower, because it would be pointless. If you recognize this is an image being projected on a wall, you wouldn't use your willpower as if you were actually in the image.
Yeah, that's where I get a little confused about what do you mean by use your willpower?
Well, yeah, what I mean is, imagine this were something like a movie, and that, Savita was a character in the movie, and you aren't Savita. Savita is in the movie, you aren't Savita. So Savita can use her willpower if she wants to, whatever that means, but whatever you feel like is your willpower is not the same as hers. So you should view yourself essentially as if you're a spectator outside the situation. Nothing you can do can affect what Savita is going to do. There's an illusion that you're her. That's the key. That's the illusion that we're trying to break, or trying to penetrate, or see through, or whatever. So in order for that to happen, right, the identification with that character and the resulting attachments and movements of mind have to be systematically broken down. When you stop using your willpower and you start noticing the imagistic nature of experience as just an image rather than reality, sooner or later you will experience some sense of peace. And the sense of peace, because it's great not having to put in effort, and the sense of peace will become addictive, and you'll slowly orient yourself further and further towards it, and other things will become less important as the basic structure of how the practice works. And eventually the attachments will weaken sufficiently that that the truth can be grasped, or that illusion can be penetrated. Though the truth is, actually, right, every time you touch peace, you're immediately rewarded. In a way, that's already your reward, even before quote unquote realization at the end. If you are in surrender now, at that very moment, you're free, because all the problems are completely in thought, only in thought. And so if you recognize thought to be thought, and you don't take it seriously, then it can't affect you. You're already free in that moment. As long as you sustain it, you're free. And so as long as you sustain surrender, you're free. You don't need to even get to the imaginary destination of realization per se. I mean, it's good to think about it, trying to get there anyway. But even without that, the truth is in the moment you surrender, you're free at that moment immediately.
Instead of we always think every moment is unreal. So now here every thought is unreal.
Yes,
That's a great
exactly,
thing.
exactly. Every thought, every feeling, those are all part of the moment, So the entire experience, it's all unreal. That's the way the surrender regards it. And it has nothing to do with me. I have no obligations regarding it, and in fact, I cannot do anything about it. Actually, it's not merely that I shouldn't do anything about it. The truth is, I cannot do anything about it. That's also actually the truth, And there's a pure illusion of being involved. You're not involved, actually. That's the truth. You cannot be involved. There's only the illusion of being involved. So, how do you sever it? This is one way. Other is self-inquiry, of course. Yeah.
Kailash, can I ask a quick
Hold on one quick second. I'll just take an in-person question, and then I'll come back to you. Just 1 second, okay? Sure. Go.
So compared to the inquiry session and the surrender session, I get more thoughts keep coming. Inquiry session, at least, we are looking at no thoughts here.
Yeah.
So when thoughts start to coming, then who is the thought? So I'm try to go into
Sure.
the inquiry mode, right?
Sure.
So that I'm losing the surrender approach.
Yes.
How
So,
do you...
you know what? I mean, like I said before, right? The truth is, right? I'm teaching them separately, but you certainly can mix surrender and self-inquiry, and they're sides of a coin. And you shouldn't feel too bad if you feel like you need to go to inquiry, because inquiry has the great advantage of being a kind of weapon that shows you the problem with the particular thought, right? What is the problem? The problem is that the reason the thought concerns you is because you think it concerns you, and inquiry says, well, who am I? This thought that concerns me, who's the me being referenced here, actually? And then you realize, I don't know who the me is being referenced here, and then that undermines the attachment. So, surrender always requires a touch more faith, and where you feel like you're being hindered in that faith, then it's perfectly natural to turn to inquiry. So it's not a bad thing, actually.
No, it's not. Yeah. But the thoughts keep coming more and more. I get more scared there. That's what I was coming.
Yes. Well, it's okay. I mean, that's fine. Let them come, right? It's they can be there, and the question is going to be whether or not you can keep recognizing that these are thoughts.
Yes,
right? You don't have to stop the thoughts. You don't have to stop the thoughts directly.
Correct.
They may eventually quieten by themselves through the practice. That's the truth. But let them come, and as long as you just stick to re-recognizing that these are thoughts.
Thoughts typically are chained, right? One after the other. It starts going in the surrender mode way more than the inquiry mode. That's what.
So I mean that might be peculiar to you. And if so, if you feel more comfortable with inquiry, you can pursue inquiry. It's not a problem. I mean, the reality is it might be the case that inquiry just feels to you, it's more captivating to you, perhaps, right? Surrender may feel more passive. It may feel, you may feel like you're not doing as much, and maybe that's why thoughts are coming in, and if you don't feel as comfortable with it, there's no obligation to do it. You can just do inquiry. Inquiry by itself is perfect, and Maharishi says, right, it's like, inquiry is like giving, I forget the metaphor he uses, but it's like, you're giving the mind something to do. You know, surrender it's subtler that way. You know, it's you're giving there is something to be done, but it's subtler, and so
we need to get used to it. So
Yeah,
I'm not
I think
used
it's
to
fine.
surrender mode, man.
It's okay to have those thoughts, like don't focus on the thoughts kind of.
well, as long as you're, it's not really about don't allow yourself to be lost in the thought.
Lost in
Which
that,
means
that's all.
when you get lost in the thought, what it means is that you forget that it's just a thought,
Yeah.
right? You take it to be,
So
to
real.
be actual,
Real.
right? Yeah, exactly. You forget yourself into it. It's like during a dream, you don't realize it's a dream. You think it's real. You know, only when you wake up do you realize it's a dream, right? But here, what's happening is effectively you're trying to wake up constantly, reminding yourself essentially that this is a dream, 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 right? Without, you don't have to use those words. The point is, as soon as you recognize this is an experience, then you notice, when you recognize this as an experience, you automatically notice there's an experiencer. This is like automatic, because when you're at the bound of one category, you're going to immediately see the other category. When you do that, you automatically are effectively waking yourself up from the dream, because you can't take it seriously as soon as you recognize that it is not actually you, basically.
But when the thought arises,
Uh-huh.
if you stop taking ownership of the thought
Uh-huh.
and just say it's a thought,
Yes.
and my mind is just processing
Yes,
it,
sure.
then slowly the thoughts actually
Yes,
slow down.
correct. That's exactly right. So that's right.
So that's what is
Slow down.
happening. So essentially the thoughts are coming, but I said it's not my thought.
Yes,
It's a thought,
exactly.
but my mind is processing it, that's all.
Yes, exactly. It's like the weather, right? It's like clouds moving through the sky. Exactly. And eventually they will slow down. You're 100% right.
It's just like the sound is not mine. It's coming from there, my ear
Yeah,
is
yeah,
processing
yeah.
it. So the thought is there and my mind is processing
Sure.
it, that's all.
Exactly.
No.
That's right.
So that's where emotions play a key role, because if a thought comes up and there is a emotional burden associated with that thought, then it won't go by like a cloud. It'll stay
Right, and that's okay too.
and multiply.
Well, that's okay too. So, the truth is, right, the truth is, again, from the pure surrender standpoint, let it stay, right? I mean, the issue is not that it has to leave. The issue is whether or not you, again, are feeling like trapped by it. It's being there. So that's the key question, right? Even if there is emotion that's sticking around for a long time, as long as you recognize this isn't really me, or this isn't really truth, it comes to the same thing, really. I'm not actually conditioned by this, right? And basically, you don't permit yourself to lose sight of that fact, right? You keep recognizing this is an image, this is an image, this is an image, and you refuse to use your willpower as if it were real, right? And what happens then is the body and the mind do only those things that they can do without your feeling like you're willing it, which is everything, whatever it does, whatever involuntary automatic actions happen without your willpower, then it doesn't matter whether those
This
emotions
is
stick
after
around.
the fact though. This is after you have mastered the surrender. But I'm saying that, like, there are times when, you remember in the beginning of the lecture, you talked about obstacles.
Yeah.
And about how we have to do some emotional processing.
Yes.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Right. So look. You're right. It's a judgment call, because if such an emotion arises and it blocks your ability to surrender in a consistent way, then you're absolutely right. If you cannot surrender, then you must step back and deal with it in some other way. For example, maybe go to therapy. So yes, but technically, if you can stay in surrender, then there's no problem with whatever happens. But if you can't stay in surrender, then you have to deal with it some other way.
What if you have suppressed it in the moment? What if you are actively suppressing something in the moment and it shows up later?
Mm-hmm.
So when it shows up, it's easier to process it. However, how I actually want to deal with it is at the moment when I'm suppressing. That's what I want to deal with. So for example, difficult session with a client. In the session, I'm trying to be present for the client. I'm trying to be with them. I'm trying to, so maybe I'm using my willpower, or, maybe I'm in the doership mode or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I come back home and I'm doing my notes, and that's when I get this rush of emotions, which I guess should have been, which I should have allowed in the immediacy of the session.
Right. Well, because like you just said, right, you know, in the session you were not surrendering.
Right.
Right.
So now the question is, so when that rush of emotion comes, fine, at that moment I surrender to it, I process it, right, I recognize it, I observe it and all of that.
Yeah.
But I'm not finding a way to, the next time it happens, like I'm not, what is the process to catch it?
Well, it's practice, right? So it's not going to be immediately, it may not be immediately natural, but
No, I'm not even sure if I'm practicing
well,
what I need to practice.
Well, so during the session, right, try to start surrendering. That's the answer. You know, because right now, what happens is, most likely, right, because you feel that you're a therapist, you have certain obligations to the client, you want to be a good therapist, blah, 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 right? You therefore feel the need to use your willpower, like you say, and enter the quote-unquote doership mode, and do, right? And so, and like you say, that might create, among other things, a certain inability to feel or process in that moment certain emotions.
Yeah.
Because there's a certain rigidity that's created by that need to be a certain way.
To perform.
To perform, exactly. And so ideally, you would start to try just exactly this, just exactly the same kind of surrender you would do while sitting here, you would try while sitting there. And that means the scary thing of trying to drop
the doership.
Drop the willpower, exactly. And then to whatever extent you perform as a therapist naturally, then so it shall be. But if you make errors, then you must permit them as well. Whatever happens, basically. Which is anyway always the case regardless, right? The reality is even when you are trying, you still make mistakes. We all do, right? So it's not like your trying is actually preventing mistakes from happening.
Yeah.
It's just making you feel as if fewer mistakes are going to happen this way. So you know, it's that's what has to happen, right? You have to, and it's going to take practice because it'll run up against fear that you're going to be you're a bad person, you're a bad therapist, you're going to fail the client, you know, you're dropping your duties and obligations, and they're all rooted in the very stubborn illusion that you are the person.
Yeah, I have to think about that.
Sure, go for it. Yeah.
But all the methods are pretty similar, I feel.
Yeah, they're similar.
Very
Absolutely.
same thing, you know.
Yes,
for
yes,
example, they go in a bhakti marga path. You know, they say that ignore everything. You know, like nothing matters. Let this have not no impression on you. Or you know, just like water, on the like eagle flying and then. Like through the oil, you know, water drips off.
Mm-hmm.
So don't let that come in there. But you are one pointed with something. It could be God or it could be self or anything
Yes.
So always in that, like ignoring everything else.
Exactly.
In other words, you know, like we are putting it in different ways.
Yes.
Different words.
That's surrender. That's surrender.
But that can lead to suppression.
Not suppression. It's not suppression. Let it. I recognize that my part of my body is feeling sad about it.
Exactly.
Let that be sad.
Yes.
Let my eyes only cry. I'm not crying.
Yes.
That kind of a feeling.
Yes.
Okay, I know it's feeling. I'm not feeling.
Yes.
But, you know,
You're permitting all the emotions to come.
Yeah.
It's just that you're recognizing them as
it's
just
okay.
Just phenomena. They may stay even for quite a while, but even so, they're phenomena. They're not you. They're not truth, and they don't require your
attention,
your willpower attention.
Like
Just to pull itself back and recognize them as phenomena, just like a painter painting. You know, it's a painting. You recognize this is not a house. This is a painting of a house. In the same way, every emotion, the same thing. This is not just anger. This is a it's a depiction of anger in a way. You know, you might say it's a depiction. Yeah. That depiction quality. But sorry, Francis, I interrupted your question. You.
No, it was just I wanted to say goodnight because we're here in New York.
Oh, okay, sure, absolutely.
But I did want to thank you so much. I think you're wonderful.
Yeah.
In
Well,
other words, I'm always, very conscientious with my clients or whatever in my life, and it makes me feel like an independent person.
Yep. I mean, this is a huge
I
barrier.
could have just jumped off here, right? But I wanted to thank you because you're very, very good, and it was a delight to be in your company. So I do want to thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for attending. And anyway, with that, we're about a time. We were 15 minutes. We started 15 minutes late, and we're ending 15 minutes after. So I think it's about time to call
notice the time.
to call it a session. But thank you all for attending, and we have a meditation practice tomorrow at 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
And then we have a session tomorrow at 7:30
7:30 in the evening, Pacific time.
Pacific time, all Pacific time. So